Every week, at least a dozen new Christian-made fantastical novels arrive from aspiring authors. Now that fan demand might finally be growing to meet this supply, it seems daunting to find the best of these stories. Today, learn how Lorehaven.com is curating the best Christian-made fantasy, sci-fi, and beyond with this flagship podcast and with our new upgraded library book search.
Speculative fiction, like no other genre, reflects the creativity of God.
If you look at the scriptures, you're going to have to see that God uses imagination more than rational discourse.
We are supposed to be image bearers for a vastly creative God.
Reading fantastical fiction opened a portal in my imagination for a place other than just a materialistic world.
I experienced the gospel story with the mind of someone who loved adventure and loved the idea of light conquering darkness.
We're wired for stories that reflect how we see the world in ways that are true.
The story is either pointing to Christ or it's pointing to our need for Christ.
You can get loud in this library for Fantastical Truth, the podcast from Lorehaven.com, where our mission is to explore fantastical stories for God's glory. I'm E. Stephen Burnett. I am blessed to publish Lorehaven since 2018, 7 years ago. I'm also the author of a new sci-fi novel launching in under 40 days and 40 nights from Enclave Publishing called Above the Circle of Earth.
And I'm Zackary Russell, and all this talk about supply and demand and maybe voodoo economics may have made you sleep a little bit, but it's time to wake up because this is episode 247. How does Lorehaven curate Christian fantastical fiction?
I announced at the start of this year that we would do a series called Lorehaven 7 Years, and we talked at length about the speculative faith legacy that is now a part of the Lorehaven website. You can go to lorehaven.com/speculative faith and see a myriad of articles from fantastic creators going back to the year 2006. But Lorehaven, with that name, has a slightly shorter legacy going back to the first part of 2018. That's when, Zach, 7 years ago at this time, I was madly at work trying to assemble a print publication. We no longer do the print magazine. It's a little harder to get hold of than a podcast and a free website. So in 2020, we changed over from that magazine basically to this podcast and other good stuff. And I will say, though, it has been a change for the better.
Yeah, I do miss the days of magazines, Stephen. My kids get the Focus on the Family Adventures in Odyssey magazine, Clubhouse magazine, I think it's what it's called. And then my older kids get the teen version of that. The name of that escapes me at the moment. But that's about it. You know, growing up, there was all kinds of magazines you could get, like National Geographic, Time, Scientific American, whatever was your fancy. But yeah, I do kind of miss those days. But this is how people like to get content. They like to get it audibly or digitally. But it's fun to look back. Although I got to say, I don't think I've ever pronounced it 2006 or 20 whatever. So I think I've always said 2006 or 06. I guess that's probably more rare. Maybe 06 is how I'd say it.
I think 2006, that's how I say it. And it's shorter to say it that way. I'm trying to be about efficiency when it comes not only to pronunciation of years, but also how we do Lorehaven. Phasing out that print magazine, about which I'll say more in a moment, certainly has given us more time to work on Lorehaven in ways that will reach the most readers possible. That's what we're talking about in this episode. However, I still have copies of that magazine. And guess what, faithful listener? Now that we're giving more stuff away for this podcast, that's going to be part of our next giveaway for this episode, 247. If you will share this episode on social media, and if you live in the United States, if you share that, then by Saturday, this coming Saturday, what is this coming Saturday? This coming Saturday, February 1st, I will mail you not only a Lorehaven gift set with some Lorehaven swag, bookmarks, podcast pins, and back issues of the print magazine. Hope you don't mind. They're going to be a few years old, and you may already know about all the books that are reviewed in there, and everything's on the website anyway, but you will get to have a part of Lorehaven history, and I will put in an autographed copy of the ARC, a paperback prototype for Above the Circle of Earth. This is the first time I've given away an Above the Circle of Earth ARC, and that'll go out with that Lorehaven gift set. If you share this episode on social media, that includes Facebook, Instagram, or X, FIX, tag Lorehaven, very important, otherwise we won't see it, and share this episode 247. By the way, listen to the end of this episode when we will announce just a few days late 2 winners for Jill Williamson's fantasy novel, Squire of Truth. We have a wheel of prizes and everything. We're going to spin that wheel a couple times and then announce the winners here. And of course, we'll reach out to you guys as well, put you in touch with our friends at Sunrise Publishing. And then next week on the episode, we're realigning our due date now. We will also announce the winner of Clint Hall's Echo Nova that Clint Hall is giving away, as well as the winner for this Lorehaven gift set, including Above the Circle of Earth. Zach, I'm having a little hard time keeping up with everything at Lorehaven because not only have I been madly at work on the next version of our front page, plus the book search and other things we'll talk about in this episode, but we're also preparing to help share these new projects from some of our fantastic creators, Marion Jacobs and Josiah DeGraff. Josiah is working on a novel, fantasy novel called A Study in Shattered Spells. And Marion Jacobs has her book coming out on magic and miracles in July. And if you stay tuned to our social feeds in the next couple of weeks, we're going to actually help promote the cover for that book on magic and miracles, nonfiction about fiction, one of my favorite genres. So you'll want to stay tuned to our social feeds for that. We're also planning our return to the Realm Makers Conference, which is now upgraded to the Realm Makers Expo. That is July 18th through 20th in Grand Rapids. We're upgraded, I believe, Lord willing, from a table to a booth. It's going to be amazing, and doing double duty as well, because it's not just the Lorehaven booth, it's now the Space Mission booth in favor of Fantastical Truth. So lots going on. I look forward to surveying the scene in upcoming chapters here.
Yeah, I will be at Realm Makers as well this year. In fact, as we record this, it's about to be early bird sign up for Realm Makers, and then the general sign up will be shortly thereafter. But I will be returning with my middle daughter, who came with me last year. So if you are a teenager listener of the show, you were at the teen track in Realm Makers 2024, you might have met my daughter, and you will get to see her again. We are already thinking a little bit about our costumes for the awards banquet, Stephen. She just told me the other day that very sadly here in town, Party City is closing and going out of business.
It's now a spirit Halloween. You're good.
Yeah, exactly.
You just have to dress like creepy creatures. That's all.
And oddly enough that you say that, the reason she told me is that because all their Halloween costumes are like 85% off or something. We thought, well, we weren't really, we don't know what they have to offer, but it'll be on a discount. Maybe we can throw something together from these costumes that they have.
She'll have to dress up as Nosferatu 2.0 from the remake. And speaking of which, our friend Mike Durand wrote a Lorehaven on-screen article last week called Nosferatu Casts Dim Light of Supernatural Truth Against Vampirism and Materialism. We'll link that in the show notes. We'll also link Daniel White IV's article, The Moral Challenge of Cheering for the Penguin. I don't even know if there's a lot of fantastical in there, but it's Batman. It's a superhero. Superheroes are fantastical. So you get in on a technicality, the Penguin. We'll talk about you, similar to The Chosen, although I think The Chosen has a lot more heroism to celebrate, whereas the Penguin is barely even an anti-hero. So Daniel has some really great thoughts there. Hey, subscribe free, by the way. We will email you these articles when they release, if you like. Podcast updates, review updates, if you like, at lorehaven.com. Free to subscribe. And you also get to hear about our sponsors, like our top sponsor now, courtesy of Oasis Family Media. It is audio-epic.com with their 1232 podcast. Speaking of ways to get audio that's a little bit more convenient than print magazines, this is an exciting binge-worthy audio epic from creators Callie Sue and Cheyenne Landry of Rumble Stump Entertainment. This is a faith in action audio adventure for all ages. When the experimental research of a physicist goes awry, his estranged twin children follow him through time to medieval Wales in the year 1232 AD, where they come face to face with a brutal world filled with superstition and legends. Along the way, they meet a penniless leader, a dark sorceress, and a warrior priest who provoke the twins into confronting the truth about themselves, each other, and Jesus Christ. Season 1 of 1232 is available now wherever you get your podcasts or audiobooks. Start listening today to 1232 and visit audioepic.com. That is audio-epic.com to begin the adventure. 1232, the Dramatic Audio Podcast. Get that link in the show notes for episode 247, this one, or for the entire Fantastical Truth archive. You can go to lorehaven.com/podcast. Also at lorehaven.com, you will find upgraded Lorehaven library functions, and especially the upgraded book search. That's the topic of chapter 1, and I think this is something that is really going to benefit our readers, maybe more than just having the library there with all the books that you can browse and click on the ages and click on the genres, maybe click on the authors to get more of the same. There's a lot of clicking going on. The library has how many titles there? I actually installed a counter that's going to show up now whenever you go to that page. How many books we got listed in there? That's what I mean by curation. There's a lot more Christian-made fantastical books.
Trying to get
oddly enough, that's the title I was saying, but then I actually did the numbers, Zach, and we're coming in hot at exactly 1,427 listed novel titles. So yeah, it's a good year until I added about 5 more. I think it was actually I had to pull a few because they were either out of print or the cover images were not up to spec. So we've got a few in reserve. We may go back and put back on there, but lots of Christian authors have been at this game for a long time, trying to make great stories for readers of all ages. And some of them last, some of them are still out there. You can find used copies, and then some of them, unfortunately, do not last. They go out of print or the author moves on to other things. But for the books largely that you can still find, that's what you will find in the Lorehaven library. It's a little different from Amazon in that we're not trying to sell the books. We're not a publisher. We're not a bookseller. We're not even in this for the profit there. Some of the newer books, by the way, do have links that will go to the Amazon. So we're part of that referral program. A lot of people were asking for that, and it was just a matter of finding a function that would make that quick and easy. But the main purpose there is that word that I mentioned in the title, curation. This is not a library where we will just take any book or we'll go out there and try to find books. That's a lot of effort for, again, not a lot of profit. We do have bills to pay. But what we do is we accept submissions from authors or publishers or even just fans of the book to the library with 3 main conditions. The book has to be published or pre-published, meaning it's going to be published. You have a date that we can put in our system to release the listing. It has to be Christian made, which means that a Christian identifying as a professing believer of Jesus Christ in good standing, presumably, has to be the author of the book. Doesn't mean it has to be labeled Christian, or you put the word inspirational on the spine. That's an old debate there. But the Christian in Christian fiction is the individual. That's my take there. And it has to be fantastical in genre. It's got to be somehow related to fantasy, science fiction, supernatural, horror, whatever. I'll tell you, Zach, that gets a little bit difficult when, for example, someone submits a book. I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, where, like, for example, it's basically complete contemporary social drama, but the hero has dreams and visions that help him to get that big promotion. Well, some Christians believe that happens in real life. And although I do believe that real life is fantastical, I don't know if that book qualifies as fantastical. So you can probably debate us, listeners, about some of the books we've got in the library, but the goal is to connect you with the best novels that we can find, where largely, with the exception of Lewis and Tolkien and some of the guys who are with the Lord now, largely these authors are still around, and we've connected with them, and we talked with them, and we put their books in the library. And then within those 1,427, as of recording date, titles, we also have reviews, 327 of the best Christian-made fantastical fiction. So reviews are a big part of what Lorehaven is. And in fact, when we started the magazine back in 2018, a big part of that was reviews, 12 per issue for that quarterly issue. And so we carried that forward once the print publication phased out, and we went, okay, let's try to do a new review every week. Well, some weeks we miss one because although we are able to help bless the reviewers for their time, people get busy, and review team members will come in and out. So right now we're rebooting the review team and kind of rebooting the review process. So we're going back and posting some of our older reviews. But this is a big part of what Lorehaven does, because we not only want to show the books that match the qualifications, we want to find the cream of the crop with an emphasis largely on newer books and present those to readers and say, hey, we have read these books. We like them. We only do positive reviews or mixed positive. We're not going to do a star ranking, condemn a book because it's terrible or something. There may be reasons why we don't review a book. But if we do review a book, it's because we liked it or loved it. And the most important part there is to connect that book with the people who will also like it or love it. We have short reviews now. We'll probably do longer ones going forward here and there as the reviewer chooses. But then each review needs to have a section that says, who is this book best for? And then also, what are some elements in the story that are worthy of a discernment conversation? And some people ask, well, what do you mean by discern? They view discern as a binary choice. It's either a 0, meaning don't read it, or a 1, everybody should read it. Discern means you can read it, probably love it, if you fit in that audience, but there may be elements to discuss. Even a middle grade book may have a little boy talking back to his parents. So discern means, hey, parents, if you're able to read this with your kids, or if you give it to your child to read later, here's something that you guys may want to talk about. May want to talk about what happens when our feelings get too big and we talk back to our parents. You want to talk about how that's a sin, because children are supposed to obey their mother and father in the Lord, for this is right. And then especially you may want to talk about the gospel, how when we do sin against our parents and against God, then Jesus will forgive us and make us into new people for his glory. Those are the point of that discern section. And then there's other stuff in there about that there may be a moment here where someone has post-traumatic stress. And I could go on more about reviews, but that is something that I think will even be easier with the book search, because now you can just search for whatever you like. You can drop down age and genre, and you can even put in a keyword, and you can filter all of the reviews and all of the library with one stroke. And I don't even need to explain that. It's a super search. It's better than what we've had before. And in the future, and I'll talk about this in a moment, we'll have that search available right from the very first page of lorehaven.com.
Yeah, so a couple of notes I had for you, Stephen. So first of all, just about this whole phenomenon of books going out of print and then no longer being even for sale as ebooks or even available anywhere as ebooks. This is something, so I'm just totally spitballing here, just brainstorming. And really, this is an idea I want to put out there to our listeners. I would love to see a way for out of print, not for sale books to still be available somehow to readers that hear about them years later, decades later, and want to go find it. But the tricky thing is that these books might still be under copyright. The author still owns the rights for however many decades. I think it's 70 years or something like that. And and there's been attempts like the Internet Archive or Project Gutenberg to sort of get a hold of these and make them available in like a digital library that's open to the public. And that's had some legal challenges and whatnot. I wonder if there is a way for us to maybe fill that gap, like, because people send us an ebook, so we've got those in a drawer somewhere. But we'd have to get permission, and we'd have to. I don't know what we'd have to do legally for all that, but it's just one of those things that I wish existed somehow, because someone might hear about a book from, a long lost relative or a friend they haven't seen in a long time. Like, oh yeah, I read this book like back in college, and where can you even find it now? So that's just a random thought I had. But about this faith statement that we have, and about the our main criteria for books. So yeah, our two criteria are Christian author, fantastical genre,
and the third is it's got to be published. Your unpublished manuscript, aspiring author, doesn't count. You've got a journey to go before you can get in the library. It's got to be available.
But we do accept indie published books, although we do kind of hold them to similar standards that a traditional published book would be held to. So, it can't be presented in the equivalent of a 3-ring binder written on scratch paper or something. It's got to be professionally put together.
And distorted GIF clip art on the front cover is also probably a disqualification. I've seen a few, although not lately. Very grateful.
Yeah. So one thing I want to point out in our, and we link to all of this on the page where authors can submit their book, and you can find this a few other places on our website, but it's our statement of faith. And I think this is really a really good thing for our listeners to be aware of, because we are simultaneously kind of a big tent, but for small o Orthodox Christians. So we are not one denomination or another. We're many different denominations here, and yet we believe in a very standard traditional view of Christianity. And what I mean is Trinitarian Christianity. That's in our opening segment of our faith statement, that God eternally exists in three persons: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So one God, three persons, standard Trinitarian Christianity. Well, why do I say that? Well, there are many splinter groups, as we can say, of Christianity that don't believe in a Trinity, that believe that are Unitarian in some way or another, or something else. And so I think it's really important that we declare that. And then also, there's we believe in the Bible, we believe in salvation by faith. We believe in God's definition of marriage, and that's another hot topic. There's other splinter groups, you could say, of Christianity that are taking very different stances on that. And again, we are taking the traditional historical stance on that. And so, we don't ask a whole lot. Again, this is we're not we don't get into the particulars of baptism or worship or end times and that kind of thing, but we do take some of these things very seriously. The second category of fantastical fiction, that's our other big defining feature here at Lorehaven. There are many great Christian novels, but a more contemporary or historical or maybe biblical fiction. And there's just not that speculative fiction aspect. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, we need stories like that as well. I've read some incredible stories like that, but there's already other websites and resources to serve those books and those audiences who want that. And so we want to serve kind of the niche of Christians that want fantasy and sci-fi, but from a Christian worldview, from a Christian author. And by the way, that's a whole other thing of like, not every story is going to be an allegory or have even a Christian in it. It might just be a standard sci-fi, but from a Christian worldview. But Stephen, I appreciate that you that our statement here includes not only fantasy sci-fi, but also horror, paranormal, and Mike Duran, who wrote a recent article for us, he was kind of lamenting this the other day, that a lot of Christian publishers don't even want to touch horror because they view it as incompatible with the Christian worldview, and we say, not so. There's quite a bit of horror that is very compatible, or at least partly compatible with the Christian worldview. And his article about Nosferatu goes in great detail. We'll talk about that more in chapter 3. But we are also kind of a big tent when it comes to the speculative genre.
One note that is on the Lorehaven faith statement is this: Christian authors whose novels we list or review may choose to affirm any comparable Orthodox faith statement, again, lowercase o there, though not necessarily this statement. So that's a bit of a catch-all there. Like, for example, I will say, and don't cancel me for this, but there may be a Catholic author who grew up in the Catholic Church, who really likes some Catholic stuff, may, in my view, go too far with the whole Mary and the Saints thing, but I do believe that someone can be a part of a Catholic church and yet be a Christian brother or sister. We've got a few Catholic authored novels, including, the Lord of the Rings listed in the library. So guys, you got to make allowance for Tolkien. He was big into Mary and everything. He's not an honorary evangelical. He was totally Catholic. So if we're going to be fair, we've got to allow that. So the Catholics may not agree with this faith statement. The uppercase O Orthodox may not agree with this statement. For example, Catholics have some extra books in the Bible. We specify 66. We're still going to list your novel. There may be a few reasons why we don't, if it's clear, if you have a chip on your shoulder, or I saw one pitch that was like, so-and-so goes back in time and sees that, Jesus was just a con artist all along. And I thought, well, that That's not how you Christian at all.
No, that's subversive.
It is absolutely subversive. So in that case, when the person clicked the box saying, yes, it's a Christian made story, I view that as dishonest. So we are going to screen that out just a little bit. But you can screen through all of these books, even the ones that we have pre-screened for you. Not that they're always safe or 100% free of any possible objectionable element. But the best part of this new book search is you can now filter all the results and go straight for the books that you would like or that a family member would like. Zach, you mentioned horror. Now we have 3 different genre tags in there: fantasy, science fiction, and then kind of that catch-all third category, supernatural and beyond. Let me just type supernatural and beyond, and then I'm going to add the keyword horror, HORROR. And without clicking any of the age groups, I'm just going to click Find Fantastical Books, and I'm going to see what we get. Intriguing. We have Jamie Jo Wright's novel, The Vanishing at Castle Moreau. That's listed in the library. We have Frank Peretti's novel, The Oath. That is definitely a good search result there. Let's see. We have a middle grade novel called Fake Nora. I'm not familiar with that, but she's a redhead grimacing at you from a mirror on the front. Sean Paul Murphy's novel Chapel Street, a novel called Winter by Oliver D. King. I remember that one. And then a bunch of others. And yeah, all of these qualify. There's Amish Zombies from Space. Oddly enough, I agree with this search result too. There is Kingdom Come, the final post-millennial book of the Left Behind series. Yeah, even the premillennialists find a way to be. Well, it is premillennial, but the book itself is post-millennial. You see what I did there? Yes. Yeah. Well, it's actually kind of mid-millennial, which is a new end times position I just made up. And then there's the library listing for Frank Peretti's The Oath. So I'll talk about this more later, but we may sort this differently on the site in the future. But once you get to the end of the book results, and you can jump to the other results too, you get all the Lorehaven resources about horror. And the first one is, there it is, our podcast episode 236, How Can Scary Stories Expose Human Sin? Christian Horror with Mike Duran. And then our episode with Mark Schooley, How Can Noble Dark Horror Explore the Problem of Evil? Then there's a bunch of Dracula episodes. There's 132, Do Christians Really Need Horror? So this benefits you, the listener, the fantastic fan who wants to glorify God in your reading choices, because not only can you find all the Christian-made books that we've found and listed and possibly reviewed, but you can also find all of the Lorehaven resources about horror, or even a smaller word. Like you can put just the keyword dragons in here. And if we've ever said anything or written anything about dragons, it'll pop up on that search. Zach, you want to search for something?
Yeah, well, that's what I was just going to say. I just clicked on a random book that's in the header. And by the way, I also can log into this new website, which we're talking about now, so I can kind of see what you're talking about.
You get to preview the front page before tonight.
Yes,
I forgot that is your power. Okay. So you'll get to see that. Well, don't reveal too much of what's on there. I'll talk about that in the next segment.
Right. Well, but one thing I want to say is that the 2 features I really want to point out is that there are tags now on books. And so you can click on a random book, and then you can just click on one of the tags and find other books like that. So for example, robots, like I clicked on that and found a couple dozen books with robots, or spiritual warfare. I found all the other spiritual warfare books. That is so fun to just like find all the books in this like sub category and then go, oh, wow, look at all these. I didn't know about this. And then, and again, we list traditional and indie published books right next to each other. We're not giving favoritism to one or the other. And so you can find all the ones that are in one category or the other. The second thing, and this is not necessarily a new feature, but it's something that I want to see more use of, is there's a comment section for every book. So if you have read the book, you know what, just add a comment on it. If you want to, if we don't have a review, you can give your own user review there. If you want to, let people know about some content they might want to discern and be aware of, you can add that. Try not to add spoilers and just use common courtesy and stuff like that. But this is where I really hope to see more interaction between our readers is in this comment section. And we try to moderate these and curate these, so don't worry too much. But the point is that we are trying to build a community here at Lorehaven. Yes, we have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that, but those are kind of like our outposts, right? That we're trying to bring readers into this site as like our home base. And we want readers to be able to interact, learn, and hear from one another. And that comment section is definitely the place to do it. Like, is it okay to say that? Like, can comment sections come back to websites?
Okay, so I will say, Zach, this is not only aspirational, but our comment section is back. And it may be because of just making the site prettier. It looks better on the mobile device and everything. I've encouraged y'all in the Lorehaven team, hey, go break the site. Even in the Safari browser, like, see if you can get it to look weird. And I think we're finally closing in on it being a truly cross-platform website. So it's really fun to read. We actually have had comments already picking up, which is super fun. And even going back to those titles in the library, one of the titles that I remember to this day that really got a fun comment section going was for an epic fantasy novel by Robert Mullen called Bid the Gods Arise, which is a fantastic title, by the way. And it's a good book too. Kind of fantasy for more mature readers, but certainly within normal Christian parameters. And that had a thriving comment section for a while, and people were reviewing the book and talking about it. And that's already happening with other books. Every time I upload a title to the library, which is all user submitted at this point, we've got some pipelines with publishers though too. So certain publishers we talk to, they automatically get their titles uploaded. A bunch of those are noticed by readers, and they will comment on them. And so this is already picking up. Did you want, well, Zach, you're there. Let's do a live demo just one more time. Just search that book search using your Safari browser. And so we can make sure it works here. And then hopefully we don't have that moment on stage at Microsoft where they get the blue screen of death. And find something that'll be useful to you and your family. Listeners, Zach has like 4 children of varying ages. So I think in his household, there's a representative of every single age listed here on the book search, which is early readers, middle grade, teens and YA, and adult readers.
Yeah. Okay. So I am really getting into cyberpunk stories now. In fact, I'm just started reading Altered Carbon by Richard Morgan. By the way, shout out to my friend Daniel Friend, who, funny enough,
he is a friend too.
Yes, who started reading that and then highly recommended it to me. I had started the Netflix adaptation, and I'm just like, nah, I don't really want to watch this. It's way too TVMA, and so I thought about reading it, but then it was, having that recommendation from a friend. Like, he's like, I'm blowing through this book. It's great. I'm like, okay, I want to read it, but it's not written from a Christian worldview. so that's, the problem that we keep coming into and that we're trying to solve with Lorehaven. We have this great new quote now that cycles through on the homepage. I'm tired of agenda fiction. Where are all the wholesome Christian-made stories? Well, guess what? They're right here at Lorehaven. So I want to read cyberpunk, but from a Christian worldview. So I just simply typed in cyberpunk, and I've got about 16 or so books that are being recommended to me. And one of them, The Prism Conspiracy by Mary Schlegel, that we have a review for. And then, we've got the summary here, then we've got the review, and then people can leave comments. You can also go through all the sub kind of genres: androids, disabilities, future, medical, robots, thriller, and just find all the related books to this. So this is so fun to be able to do this now.
Now, Zach, did you filter by age there, or did you kind of get everything at once? I see a few titles here. Most of them are more grown-up skewing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try the filter. Try the filter with something.
That's literally all I typed in, just to kind of see all the books. But what's great is whenever you hover your mouse, if you're on a desktop, I don't exactly know how this works on an iPhone or something. When you hover a mouse, then it will say teens and YA, teen girls.
Okay, no, what I'm
adults.
talking about is you go up to the library, search our library. You can click cyberpunk there, and then if you're seeing the ages, early readers, middle grade, teens and YA, and all adults, you can click either all adults, just filter out any middle grade cyberpunk story that happens to be in the library, which is kind of unlikely for this genre. So let me actually change this here. I'm gonna
I'll do that. But my point is, like, even if you don't filter, if all you do is type in one word and search, you'll find everything. And then you can look at the book titles, like on the thumbnail, and you can see what the age range is. But for example, I did what you said. I clicked men, and there's only really 2 cyberpunk books that are specifically geared towards men. It's or at least in terms of what we have filtered them. So it's Strange City and then Frayed. And both these have such great titles. Strange City by, I'll do my best here, Daniel Tuituku, Tuitu.
Daniel, send us your pronunciation guide now that we've given you a free shout out.
The pinyin style, so I don't know if that's the right way to say that. But fantastic looking title. Very interesting story about a journey through the bizarre reality of World City. Okay, this is intriguing me already. I can see all kinds of more information on that book page.
Now, there may be even more books, though, that are geared specifically towards men. We would just need to go through there. And of course, that's kind of a judgment based on the cover, based on the premise of the book. Those tend to be more specifically for men or women. Let's just be honest, folks. There's some book covers that like, well, this is very clearly mainly for female readers. Dudes can read it. But if you've got a flowy dress and a bunch of royal drama on the front cover, then that's probably more for female readers. So you can sort by those. But if you want to just show, okay, where's all the books that are mainly of interest to teens and young adult readers or adult readers, you can click that box and then it will filter them. I mean, if I type dragons, for example, and then click middle grade, hey, I'm starting to feel like I'm on overnight TV or something, but this is completely free. I'm not wanting you to send anything to a post office box. If I type dragons and I go to middle grade, yeah, there's all the results there. Including, by the way, Garden of Mysteries, a Dragon Slayer Bible story, which we're going to pitch in just a moment for our second sponsor. A few other things I want to add there, Zach, so you and the listeners know too, is with each library listing, I want an unobtrusive frame at the bottom of that will show automatically similar titles, whether it's titles by the same author or titles in the same genre or that match the same keyword. I would just love to see, oh, well, I came here because I wanted to see what people were saying about this book, but it'll also automatically show me books that are similar, that are best for the same kind of readers who are interested in these kinds of topics. Those are some other options that are coming in. This site is almost always a work in progress, so stay tuned. And of course, subscribe free at lorehaven.com. I need to send out an update about this, by the way, and I haven't even talked about the front page yet. We'll save that for chapter 3 because we haven't even put up the new front page just yet. Zach gets to see it because he's an insider.
Yep. Using my Jedi powers to peer into the future here.
Yeah. Well, that's a benefit of being basically the chief librarian at this point, is that until we get some extra help around here, everything kind of goes through me. But that includes the web design. And I know enough about programming and design here to be dangerous. But I will say I've had some help for that new front page from Jeneth Dick, who's a fantastic cover designer, storyteller in her own right, artist. And she also does all of the social media art for our Lorehaven reviews and articles and all kinds of other good stuff. I mentioned our second sponsor a moment ago, Lori Christine. She is sponsor number 2 for this episode with her book, which is also listed in the library, Garden of Mysteries, a Dragon Slayer Bible Story, introducing a new middle grade biblical fiction with a fantastical twist, an ancient curse, an invisible dragon, a mysterious prophecy. Seth's parents have secrets they won't share with him. Why did the king kick them out of the garden and curse the land? And can the curse be broken? Finding answers to Seth's questions will prove more dangerous than he imagined. Can he discover the truth before the dragon destroys him? Frank Peretti meets the Jesus Storybook Bible in this adventure-packed middle-grade novel that will inspire readers to identify lies of the dragon and to put their trust in Jesus, the Dragon Slayer. Garden of Mysteries is available for purchase now on Amazon. You can also check out the companion devotional for Garden of Mysteries sold separately on Amazon. Learn more at dragonslayerbible.com. You can also find those links in our show notes for this episode 247. Zach, if you go to the library for that entry for Garden of Mysteries, we have that sorted with particular interest for boys. Now, it's fun having a classification like that because you can put it under the middle grade category. Doesn't mean that, oh, this is a book for boys, girls can't read it. You know, lots of social damage has been done by such notions. Don't do that. Don't freeze out the girls. But it's mainly for boys. Like that is how she has marketed it, Lori Christine. We've had her on the show before talking about it. And she's been talking about how she sees that need for middle grade fiction of particular interest for boys. And I think that a lot of parents are also looking for that. And so that's one of the special interests I have in putting together the library and the book search, is finding books for readers who kind of feel frozen out from the whole reading community. They may have the wrong impression that, oh, Christian science fiction, Christian made science fiction is just a bunch of end times books, and it's a bunch of preachy books. Well, go to the library and I think you'll discover differently. Or maybe they think that it's just a bunch of bonnet stories. Again, go to the library, find some books for your young lads. They will enjoy reading Garden of Mysteries and a bunch of these other books. But moving on from the library search, let's talk about this podcast, which is, I think, Zach, now 5 years old as of last week. We started this show in the January of 2020, actually. There were rumblings of pandemic, and we actually recorded those first few episodes together. Now, it saves a lot of time doing it how we do now. But I've got to say, and I don't think I've said enough, that the podcast was Zach's idea. At the time, I was very much knee-deep in the print magazine model of thinking and thought, wow, a podcast sounds like a lot of work. Can we do that? Could we do it every week? Would this even work to reach our audience? And it turns out that, yes, it has worked very well. In fact, I imagine a large portion of the Lorehaven readership now has gotten there because of this podcast. We're closing in on 250 episodes and just hit our 5-year anniversary. Zach, any thoughts on what it was like to try to get this show started in those weeks after Christmas with that first episode, which is about the very definition of Christian-made fiction?
Okay, so I'm going to reveal something to you, Stephen, that I may not have even ever told you.
So you don't even find out about people until they have company in the room. So I'm looking forward to this.
And I'm almost certain I've never revealed this on the podcast. But yes, as you said, we started this podcast officially in January of 2020. But it was back in early 2019 that I started getting the idea for a podcast. Now, I didn't really know what I wanted to do for that. I originally went to a webinar in February of 2019. It was just called How to Start a Podcast. And I think this was from Thomas Umstattd of the Novel Marketing Podcast. Great guest, great host. In fact, a couple of our top episodes have been when he was a guest, and people continue to listen to those episodes. And he had a seminar, and it was about like, okay, here's the hardware to get, here's the software to get, here's a whole tutorial about how to start your own podcast. And I don't know why I went to that webinar. I just thought, oh, this would be kind of fun to explore this. But, for the last 15 years in my day job in the ministry I work for, I have been a video editor, and I've done a lot of other AV kind of things. But mostly I'm the person, behind the camera or behind the editing station. I'm not the person in front of the camera or in the spotlight or on the mic. And I don't know what it was that made me think, oh, maybe I could do a podcast. But I was probably thinking, oh, I'll just produce or edit a podcast for someone else, maybe for my ministry, maybe for some other topic related to fiction. I was right in the middle of writing my first novel during this time. Not published yet, and actually kind of stowed away in a drawer. That's a conversation for another time. And then in May, I went to another podcast webinar. And then I actually went to a conference here in town called the Outlier Podcast Festival. And there I met some really amazing people doing incredible shows. A lot of it's kind of like our show now. It's like discussion based or interview based. Or news topics, particular to whatever it is we cover. And that was actually kind of the first thing that was interesting to me was like, there are a lot of podcasts that cover breaking news in very niche categories, like new horse saddles, for example, just something random, or new carburetors, like whatever it is, you can find a podcast on it now. There's like a million podcasts. But the other thing that, and here's kind of the big secret, is the genre of podcast that really intrigued me from the Outlier Festival was fiction podcast. So a podcast that is a fictional story. And there were some incredible ones that I listened to there. And so I started thinking of, hey, what could I do for a podcast? And again, I'm not thinking of myself as the star of the podcast. I'm thinking like, what if I could put this together? And I thought, well, I'm a missionary in my day job. What if I make some kind of missionary based story? And so my original idea was the first missionaries to Proxima Centauri b, the Earth-sized planet around the nearest star. It's a red dwarf star to the Earth. I thought, what if humans go there, they settle, they create these colonies or whatever, and then some missionaries are like, hey, we need to go share the gospel there. Or the other idea I had was, we've seen alien movies where they land their spaceship on the World Trade Center or the Statue of Liberty or Hollywood or some other landmark that everyone recognizes. But what if the first landing site of an alien spacecraft was a megachurch? What if a pastor is the first person to make contact with an alien species? And so the podcast would be like the diary or the drama or the recordings of that kind of thing. And then I thought of all these other types of stories I'm not going to go into right now, but that was my original idea. And then it was several months later that I started brainstorming with you. I think it was in October that year. And we wanted to center each episode around some kind of story question of a book, like what if your parent was an alien? And we wanted to take, kind of a book at a time and do an episode about it. And at this point in time, we had about 100 reviews on Lorehaven of books. And so I thought, man, we could cover one book a week for two, and we have enough content for 2 years. That'd be pretty easy. In our original idea for this podcast, I think we were just going to call it the Lorehaven Book Club and just talk about a book each week. And, and we've since broadened it to talk about culture, to talk about theology, to talk about pop culture. We don't just talk about the books we review. We talk about a lot of books and also movies. But that was how this whole thing got started.
It was, and I'm grateful that we chose to broaden that, because the whole mission of Lorehaven is not simply to review the best books that we can find, but also to train one another. It's a discipleship mission, to train one another about what is the purpose of these stories in God's world. Why do we even have the ability to share in imagination and to imagine these new worlds in fantasy and sci-fi and such? What is it for? What is the purpose? And I answer in short, as we've answered many times on this show and at Lorehaven, the purpose is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. And fiction is but one of the gifts, culture creation is one of the gifts that he's given us to do that. So that plus discussing with some apologetics perspective, different views or different assumptions about what fiction is for. Oh, it's just a distraction. It's just entertainment. It's just for fun. Or even it's to teach morals, or it's to evangelize the reader. Like, all those may be very worthy pursuits, but they cheat what I think is that greater definition of fiction as a tool, a useful tool designed to help us worship God. And so that, plus some of the cultural conflicts that are adjacent to fantasy fandoms and movies that are turning away from skilled storytelling into agendas, like, all of those figure into that main goal of exploring fantastical stories for God's glory. And I will say, on a practical note, it would have been very difficult for both of us to speak in an informed way every week about a book. And also, there's just challenges with getting authors on the show. And I'd say maybe I'd have to do the math, but I'm guessing that maybe half or 1/3 of our episodes are with guest authors. We want to find as many of the good ones as possible, and always with a unique vantage. Like our past 2 episodes, Zach, people know, we're with Jill Williamson about what is medieval fantasy, and then with Clint Hall, what is soft science fiction. And we'll be doing more of those episodes this year with particular attention to subgenre. If we find a new book that's come out that happens to answer a question, what is this subgenre? What even is this kind of story? And the person's got a good mic and they're good to be on the show, then those are the types of folks that we want to talk to. So 250-ish episodes down. I think it actually is 250 now if you include the trailer and a couple of bonus episodes we've done here and there. 250 more to go. Soli Deo Gloria.
Yeah, and like you said, we like to cover all the topics related to fiction and storytelling and art and creativity, and so we'll just take one subtopic and really do a deep dive and talk about the Christian perspective on this, or the ins and outs of that. And it goes way beyond what my original idea was for this, which was basically just talking to Christian writers and saying, well, how did you portray the gospel in this book? And that was just kind of my original thinking, was like, oh well. And as you've shared before, Stephen, oftentimes Christians are not just writing a book to share the gospel or make a Jesus character. They are trying to show an aspect of the Christian life, and it may be more about discipleship, or it may be about missions, or it may be about living the Spirit-filled life, or conquering sin. Any number of things. Like the Christian life is more than just evangelism. Right? Like there is so much to the Christian life. And so we explore all of those elements, and we explore all the different genres, including the sub-genres. And we really want to get into the details and explore all these things in depth.
What's also great about the upgraded search box, and you don't even have to use the book search box. If you go to lorehaven.com, there's the search box right there at the top, or click the menu if you're on a mobile browser, and boom, there it is too, mobile browsers and tablets. And you can search anything, including, I'll do it right now, probably our most popular topic on the podcast whenever we get to it is, Zach, you know it, you love it, aliens. Audiences love aliens. So all I have to do there in the search box is type aliens. I'm going to skip past all the books about aliens. If there is an option to click jump to, what is it here? Yeah, other results. I can just jump down. There we are. All the podcast episodes at the top, plus some other stuff. What are the scariest stories about aliens among us? Episode 235. Are the aliens liars, lunatics, or lords? Episode 175. And then 105. What if planet Earth was invaded by hostile corporate aliens? Maxine Justice Galactic Attorney with Daniel Schwabauer, who, by the way, a spoiler alert, is coming back to the show to talk about another nonfiction book about fiction that is coming out this month. So a preview of coming attractions there is also our past archive of as much wisdom as we can get about topics. And in the future, too, you'll be able to filter the search results and just look at the podcast or just look at the articles, in addition to having all the book and review search results display by themselves. We'll put some of those links in the show notes, too. But one of those genres that I mentioned earlier covering is medieval fantasy. And our best new example of that is also our third sponsor, Sunrise Publishing, with Squire of Truth by Jill Williamson. We talked with Jill for episode 245, What is Medieval Fantasy? But here's the book. Cole has journeyed far from his days as a stray stable boy in a distant mountain village. Haunted by failures on the battlefield, he seeks solace in music. But when the songstress he spent a fleeting evening with shows up at his doorstep, Cole may have gotten more than he asked for. Amidst the turmoil of a looming royal wedding and the threat of dark magic, Cole and Mistel must unravel the mystery of a brutal murder before they become the next targets in a deadly game of power. Return to the world of Eretz in Squire of Truth, a murder mystery romantasy from award-winning author Jill Williamson, and the first installment in the epic Blood of Kings Legends series. You can get Squire of Truth at Amazon and in the Sunrise shop, and of course see more details in the cool cover in the Lorehaven library. Upgraded search available too. Get all those links in the show notes for this episode 247 and at lorehaven.com/podcast. Chapter 3, you can not only search the Lorehaven library and reviews and listen to Fantastical Truth, which is now 5 years old, you can also go deeper with resources from faithful creators. And this is where I give a preview of coming attractions first off. The front page, Zach, you see it now. I think this may be the first time you've seen it on the show, because I forgot. I made that available to anybody who's not only the administrator of the site, but an editor. You can see the shiny there. And that too is designed to help put the best of these discerning Christian fantastical resources right in front of folks. There's all the categories of our different content up there. That includes maybe one of our favorite features of the site. It's also the articles. Now, I'm an editor. I got my start writing in journalism. I used to write about city council meetings and upgrades to the sewage plant and all that local stuff, which seems boring, but the details of which affect a lot of people, even though there's a lot of social drama and small town politics and business and all of that. Maybe that helps me enjoy the making of articles, particularly with attention to a topic that I love most, Christian-made fantastical fiction. So we have a lot of articles on the site, many, many more, hundreds, thousands if you count the Speculative Faith archive. And yet at Lorehaven, we have like a process for pitching articles. Like it's a proper publication, really, where we have a group of creators we work with or some guest writers that we recruit to talk about issues of interest to Christian fans of fantastical stories. And especially this year, we've been working more with our staff creator, Josiah DeGraff, who's been editing the on-screen features. Those have been especially popular. I mentioned at the top of the show, those 2 articles we have about Nosferatu and the Penguin. But if you go back further, we also had an article about War of the Rohirrim. It's not a review. It's just a short piece that takes a basic idea of the movie and then contrasts that with a Christian worldview and basic expectations for a good movie or show or game or whatever. That's why it's called On Screen. So we're dealing with some of that popular culture stuff that everyone's talking about, not just books. But of course, we did have our 1-2 punch a couple of weeks ago, a couple of articles about Brandon Sanderson, one more of a survey of the Stormlight Archive, and then another one about what A.D. Sheehan called the postmodern cringe storm around Wind and Truth. Lots of readers there, lots of great discussion, much appreciative, but some against, and that's okay. The point is not to find the stuff that we don't like, but to find the stuff that we do like or want to like, and then talk about that from a biblical perspective. So that's a big part of the articles there, as well as the news updates and some of the other stuff that we put up that is of interest to Christian fantastical fans who want to go a little deeper.
Yeah, I want to highlight our most recent 2 articles. One is by Daniel White about the moral challenge of cheering for the Penguin. Really great article. I've written a couple articles about villains, so I really appreciate everything Daniel said here. It's a lot of similar thoughts that I've had. And just, the Penguin is the main character. He's the protagonist, but he's also not really a sympathetic villain. So he's bad in every which way and betrays everyone in his life. And it doesn't really glorify him as sort of this misunderstood, person who's just a tragic victim of the system. No, he's very intentionally evil. And Daniel even has a footnote that, there might be some kind of mental illness or PTSD or something with Oswald, but he still is completely coherent and takes response. He's clear thinking in all of his decision making. So he's not out of control of himself. It's not like he's possessed or something. He's just very intentionally evil. And Daniel says, quote, "Our moral inclinations are partly shaped by the stories we tell and participate in." And then he talks about some real life bad guys that have become quite popular in very disturbing ways. And so you can read where he talks about that there. And then Mike Duran, his article about Nosferatu, which casts dim light on supernatural truth against vampirism and materialism. Man, really great article here from Mike, because it's the whole backstory of Nosferatu is interesting. It's sort of like an alt version of Dracula, but it also takes villains very seriously. And, villains are actually evil. They're not sympathetic. And we're not rooting for some anti-hero either. We're rooting for the good guys that are defeating evil, clearly good and evil here. And there's supernatural. There's Christianity is portrayed positively. Now, Mike does share a lot of things about why this movie is R-rated, so it may not be for everyone's cup of tea. But, and he says, look, the movie's stark depictions of evil will leave some troubled, but there is a redemptive outcome. And the movie forces people to face the existence of real evil. And I think with both of these stories, Stephen, it's representing sort of a cultural shift that we're seeing in 2025 as we record this, which is that audiences are kind of tired of the misunderstood villain who's really the good guy, and it's really the system that needs to be burned down. Like, no, there really are evil people. Like, good and evil actually exist. Morality is not all relative. I think people are really escaping the fog of this sort of postmodern spell that's been cast over a lot of society. And now that doesn't mean that these, mainstream stories are gonna perfectly reflect a Christian worldview. But what I think it does is it gives that opening for Christian creators to say, a greater Nosferatu has appeared, or a greater penguin is here, because they're getting part of the equation right. They're saying, look, sin actually exists. There is actually an evil force in the world. It's not just psychology. It's not, you can't just solve it with chemistry. There is a supernatural reality in this world. And we get to kind of finish that sentence from a Christian worldview.
Oh, you just triggered me a little bit with that line that in my mind has become a bit of a self-parody. Someone greater than the hero of your favorite movie has appeared. It's the newer and greater Spider-Man, is the newer and greater Iron Man. Yeah, and that's one reason why, a little transparent here. Well, why stop now? But it's one reason why I've been somewhat reluctant about doing articles about general fantastical popular culture, because in my mind, at least for a while, well, other websites are already doing that. Like some of the folks going to the Realm Makers Expo, they're the ones who are reviewing, tabletop games and video games, and they're doing the pop culture stuff from a Christian perspective. And it's not that I don't want to take away from their game, but in my imagination, that's kind of in my past. I want to move on and only talk about the Christian-made stuff. And yet our readers also want to talk about those movies. And there may be a take that we have that is going to be different from a more mainstream evangelical take. If there's an article at Gospel Coalition, God bless them, but they may have a different take than we have. And there's another advantage too. In our on-screen format, it's designed to be fast. We're not doing think pieces. We're not doing a 45-minute YouTube deconstruction of a Martin Scorsese movie. We're doing 600 words or less, one key idea from the movie, go. Start the discussion, don't finish the discussion. And that maybe fills a niche, but it's also an increasingly wide niche because there's some Christian publications, including some for whom I used to write, that aren't doing movie reviews anymore. And many of them don't even do book reviews. I was really happy to see, for example, World Magazine, a great Christian-run organization, is now doing more book reviews, including reviews of Christian fantastical books. So more power to them. Welcome you in to our territory. But whereas we focus on only Christian-made fantastical books, reviewing those, and then we'll occasionally talk about the movies too. Speaking of which, the book quests, I gotta say, I don't even think I've put out an update about this, but for those of you in the Lorehaven Guild, our Discord server, and by the way, you should subscribe to Lorehaven, we'll email you the code to join said server. We have been doing monthly book quests in there. We have paused those for now because they're a lot of work and folks want to take a break for a bit, but they will be back. I will say they will be back in some form, and I think you're going to like the form. That is a lot more convenient for the readers, and also, secondly, of benefit, of convenience to your fantastical, but sometimes weary Lorehaven creative team. The reviews and the book quest will be back, and who knows, they may kind of be the same thing in the future. A little forecast there for you. Zach, you've got the front page pulled up. Now, faithful listeners, as this episode drops, you won't be able to see that front page. I think we're going to roll that out in early February. But Zach, I get to ask you, what think you of that prototype new front page for lorehaven.com? And you can be as nice as you want.
Well, I love the background, of course, of the floating castle island with the planets behind it. So it's kind of fantasy and sci-fi all together, which just immediately signals that that's our specialty here. I like that there are, right away some options to do a book search, find articles, podcasts. And then I like that there's this rotating quote here kind of below that where it says, And right now it says, which fantasy stories are safe for my kids? And we find the safer books, and even better, the good books. And then you can go straight to our library from there. And and again, that's our specialty here. The articles that we talk about, when we have all different topics for articles, on screen, we're talking about what's on streaming or in the movie theaters. Those are sort of like our outposts, because that's where a lot of people start. They're like, well, I want to try sci-fi. What am I going to watch? And they just pull up whatever's new on their streaming platform of choice, or they pick a book off the bookshelf at their local bookstore. And then they kind of have this feeling of, well, that was really fascinating or exciting. But man, there's a lot of things that really bothered me in that. And then they look up the author, they look up the director. They're like, wow, this person has a totally different worldview. No wonder why so much of that story made me uncomfortable. Where can I go to find something better? And especially if it's for my kids. And to switch metaphors a little bit, we tackle those things in pop culture because that's kind of the appetizer, I think. The main course that we want to bring people to are the book quests, which are kind of paused, but our book discussions and our book reviews. And really the place to get into that is in our Discord server, where we go into we have a lot more lively discussion about all these books by Christian authors.
Yeah, that quote page on the front will show up regardless of what device you're using. But we also have a quote. I just refreshed it a few times to get to that. That should sound familiar to listeners of this podcast. We're wired for stories that reflect how we see the world in ways that are true. I believe that is attributed to S.D. Smith, author of the Green Ember series. You actually click on that and you can go straight to the podcast episode for that. So we'll tell you, once we've got this front page up, every quote from the current opening of the podcast is mixed into those quotes in the front. And there will be many more as we find them going forward. So it gives new fans, especially for the site, our new readers, kind of a taste of what we're about and the types of folks that we've been blessed to talk to as part of this mission. And by the way, that word mission, that really is what Lorehaven is. I struggle to define it sometimes because it is not, a ministry. We're going to churches and showing slideshows and then, asking for $100 a month. And it's not a for-profit company either. This is a group of people, Christian fantastic creators, who are largely volunteering their time because we have a special interest in raising up and cultivating a readership for these kinds of stories. We want people not only to find these books that they're going to love from Christian creators, but to think more biblically about them, to raise their standards, and therefore raise not just awareness, but raise our expectations for these kinds of stories. We don't want more of them necessarily. We already got plenty, but we want better stories. We want to raise the caliber of thought, not just worldview, but beauty and craft that is being put into these stories. That's a large part of this podcast. That's a large part of Lorehaven.com. And that new front page, when we get it, is going to help you find all that stuff. By the way, better place for all of our sponsors too. Zach, I don't know if this works on your browser, but if you roll over those little sponsor ads there, first it makes more clear that they are sponsors. These are folks that we know, that we've talked to, who we trust. We got these glorious banner ads on the front. You roll over them, they just sort of pop out just a little bit. And then you can click on those and go to that resource for some of our friends like Enclave Publishing. Of course, I got my book on there. Right now, we've got Josiah DeGraff as well, Squire of Truth. And then, of course, our folks at our friends at Enclave Publishing with the new Enclave store. So that leads, by the way, to something I don't often say here. If you want to sponsor this show and or the website, most people want to sponsor both, you can go to that page. It's a lot easier to find now, too, on the menu. If you click on that and you just go to About, and then there is the Request a Review page there. But we're also going to have just an author resources page you can get to more easily from the website. It's just lorehaven.com/author resources. And then you can find everything that we can do for you to share your novel or get it reviewed maybe with new fans. If you're a publisher, you're a creator, we want to connect your story with fans that'll love it. And of course, maybe you're not a publisher or author. Maybe you're just a fan who searches the library and you go, well, my favorite isn't in there. You can add it. You can add it in there. And then we'll be able to connect that book that you have loved with the readers who will also love it most for the glory of God and for more and better of these Christian-made fantastical novels.
Well, to you, our listener, we want to know, how has Lorehaven helped you find a new fantastical favorite? Did you find a book that you had searched for? Did you find a related book? Were you brought here through a review or an on-screen article or just some other article that we've published about fantastical stories? Send us a note to podcast@lorehaven.com. Of course, you can always tag us in a social media comment on Facebook, Instagram, or X. And now we're going to go to a really fun segment. It's the prize wheel. We're going to be giving away 2 copies of Jill Williamson's book, Squire of Truth. And you have to be a U.S. resident to win this. And we are going to find out who is going to win these copies right now. We're going to pull up the prize wheel.
Our first winner for Jill Williamson's medieval fantasy / romantasy is at Kelly Fernlake on Instagram. She will be getting a softcover edition of Squire of Truth and a signed nameplate from Jill Williamson. I'll have to check. Maybe it's a hardcover. I have to get these details in before we do the prizes. But as you know, Zach and listeners, this is the first time really where we've moved all the way into actually giving away some of these copies. Thanks to the generosity of our guest authors on the show. And Sunrise Publishing was especially generous because they put up not just 1, but 2 copies of Squire of Truth. So we get to do this again. Zach, do you have the prize wheel that listeners need to help us name? Do you have it ready? Okay.
All right, here it goes, and let's hit it.
Our second winner for aforementioned Squire of Truth is at Krista N. Reed on Instagram. Again, lots of folks sharing this on Instagram. You had to share the episode and tag Jill Williamson as well as Lorehaven for us to notice. If you shared it and didn't win, well, thank you for sharing it anyway. Getting the word out about Lorehaven is its own reward, but for these 2, they'll also be getting the reward of those new physical editions of Squire of Truth, along with the signed nameplates from Jill Williamson, so you can autograph that one effectively. Next week, we will announce the winner of Echo Nova from Clint Hall, our last guest. And then for this contest, I mentioned at the top of the show, we're awarding a Lorehaven prize pack, kind of a gift set there, a bunch of Lorehaven swag, some classic copies of the print magazine, only slightly aged because they're like going back to maybe 2019 or 2018, right before the lockdown kind of put the kibosh on that. But I'll throw in some other good stuff there, and especially a signed advanced review copy of Above the Circle of Earth, soft cover prototype of that novel. The first time I've given away one of these, and that novel does release in about, oh my goodness, about a month from now. So I've been really busy, not only with Lorehaven stuff, but with science fiction stuff. Hey, speaking of science fiction, you can send us, as Zach said, your note to podcast@lorehaven.com or post a comment on the episode page at Lorehaven, like did our next reader.
Yep. So Adam David Collings enjoyed our previous episode 246 about soft science fiction. He says, quote, I tend to read more soft sci-fi, but don't mind some hard sci-fi. Project Hail Mary was awesome. I write soft science fiction. I use the term space opera. Echo Nova sounds cool. I'm always a sucker for some time travel, end quote. Yeah, Adam, Project Hail Mary was a lot of fun. It's like a scientist or an astronaut gets lost in space and has to figure out how to get home and where he even is and what's going on, and has to science his way out of it. It was a lot of fun to read that. My teens read that. Some our family friend Laura read that. My coworker Nancy read that. It's a really enjoyable book by the fan of hard science or not. A lot of people have liked that book, and again, it's a little bit cleaner than The Martian, which may have had one too many F-bombs for a lot of readers. And there's kind of a funny reason for that in the story, but I'm glad you like that episode, Adam, and thanks for that note.
Going into February, next on Fantastical Truth, this month might bring to mind many fantastical subgenres, especially thanks to Valentine's Day. These include stories like fairy tale retellings and the latest subgenre buzzword, romantasy. Well, that is where Zach and I need to rely on the wisdom of guest authors, because we don't know a whole lot about these genres personally. So we're going to bring in some folks as backup to help us return to our on again, off again series throughout this year, exploring Jesus in every genre. Thanks to all of you podcast listeners who have stuck with us, some of y'all from the beginning of 5 years ago, and some of y'all who know about Lorehaven going back 7 years ago, and many of you who may even remember the origins of this site in the previous website, Speculative Faith. I just want to thank God for you so much. Share this episode, whether or not you get to win books. It is so appreciated as we continue to seek and find Christ's fantastical truth.